Hi, I'm Doug Jessop. Welcome to another episode of Family Heritage Stories. With me today, Chris Crowley. Chris, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
So now, we've been interviewing a bunch of guys with these vests and the hats, and they have some kind of connection. So what does this vest mean to you?
This vest, for me, is in remembrance of the people who didn't come home, the wounded and the other pilots. I'm the one who gets these vests put together and makes sure everybody has one, which we handed out to today.
Gotcha. So there's some names. Tell me about these people.
These are 3 pilots who were killed in action in Vietnam in an effort to save other people.
Okay. So John P. Supple, Douglas G. McNeil, and Robert L. Horst. Did you personally know any of those gentlemen?
I did. I knew Doug McNeil very well.
Tell me about Doug.
Doug was a school teacher from New York, a historian, very academic type, and volunteered when he was 28 or 29 to go to Vietnam. And he was a dedicated pilot, and he extended a tour. He and I flew a lot of missions together, and he was killed on a mission where he took a 50 round through the chest. His aircraft flipped.
Mm. How did you become a pilot?
I was in college, and I was going to be in pre-med, and I had been to Vietnam twice in the Merchant Marine while I was in college, so I was familiar with Vietnam. My father was a senior officer in Vietnam, and I knew somewhat what was involved. I knew the end result was probably not going to be good, so I decided that I wanted to be a DustOff, a medevac pilot. I knew from the get-go that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I did.
So Merchant Marine to DustOff with Army, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for the people that don't understand what DustOff is, try to explain it to me.
DustOff is the difference between DustOff and other medevacs is DustOff aircraft are unarmed. They don't have machine gunners. Their sole purpose is to get as many people out and rescue anyone, whether they're the enemy or pregnant mothers or children or American soldiers, out and no matter what the circumstances are.
It's pretty noble, but I also think that I'm guessing these people are in some areas that you wouldn't normally want to be. So as a pilot, there's different people. Okay, so explain to me who would be crew-wise on a DustOff.
There'd be 4 people. One would be the aircraft commander, the other be what you would call a co-pilot, the other is a medic, and the other is a crew chief who's responsible for the maintenance of the aircraft. 4 men.
And you were which role?
Aircraft commander.
Okay. So what does that person do?
He's responsible for flying the aircraft and getting everybody home safely, and making decisions to go in or not to go in. Not to minimize what the medic and crew chief did. The medic was the most valuable person on the aircraft, but it was the job for me was to get in quickly and get out quickly and not ask questions. That was it. It was very simple.
So there's a book that's been written, okay? And there are chapters in there. Is there a chapter that talks about you?
There is.
Tell me about your chapter.
Well, first I'll start with I write the introduction and the preface for Randy Milliken, who's the author of the book, and I write to his chapter and describe who he was and how selfless he was and is to this day the most selfless person I know. And then there's a chapter on myself, and the introduction is from a guy who's no longer with us, Jim Dixon, and Randy Milliken, who visited my parents in San Francisco and told them about what I did. They never really knew until that time. And then my chapter is an amalgam of things, including some humor and some not so humorous things.
Can you share some of that?
Sure. We are we're picking up some nurses and some doctors to make a routine transfer of personnel from one hospital to another. And this particular day, we picked up 2 nurses. And we're just flying off, taking them up to the new hospital, and sure enough, there's a Mayday call. It's a light observation helicopter saying, Mayday, 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 we're going down. They give their coordinates, and that's it. So we're heading directly in that direction. So we see a small fire support base. We drop off the nurses. The nurses with a young American lieutenant go up to the top of the tower because they're going to be able to see us. As we're flying out, this is all John Wayne type thing, this is why it's kind of humorous. A flight of F-105s hear what happened, say, we'll cover you going in. There's no other cover on the ground. So they're going in and they're dropping their bombs, and we go in, we see them right away. We get them out without incident, without taking any fire, and we're flying back to get the nurses to pick them up. In the meantime, both of them are covered in JP4, so their private parts are burning like crazy. And they're yelling and they rip off their clothes. We land at the fire support base. The nurses are coming here. These guys don't see the nurses. They run and they jump into a bomb crater full of green slime water to alleviate things. And as they're coming back, they encounter the nurses. So they're running elbows akimbo, bow-legged back to the aircraft. And then we take the nurses back. Nurses never go on hot missions, and we get back to the hospital where we're taking them. And the main thing about that story is, even though there's humor to it, these nurses just out of college and nursing school have no idea what they're going to be encountering day after day. So we get there, and one of them comes up to the window and says, "Is every day like this?" And then I say, little would she know what she's going to be encountering.
Yeah.
So that's part of the chapter.
So it was every day like that day?
Every day was different.
Yeah.
And why I love the job, for me, I felt born to do it. It's what I was just driven to do it. We were busy all the time, so you didn't sit around wondering or worrying about things. You just got the job done. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain exhilaration being on the edge, putting it all out there and being able. You don't think about it in terms of heroism at the time, but when you look back after 50 years, there is a sense of pride.
Yeah.
And that's why I wear this. And I've only worn this because Randy gave me this a couple of years ago.
So the ride of your life, literal and figurative. So what's the ride of your life mean to you?
Is everything we're going to say here be recorded?
Oh yeah. Well, we can take it out if you need to.
Well, in a humorous vein,
okay.
I got on the airplane today, and the United stewardess sees my vest. I says, "Come up here with us. We want to hear you." And she's kind of awestruck by it. And I go back to the rear of the plane. But in the meantime, I'm texting these guys. The stewardess, because of the vest, wanted me to come forward. But I'm convinced the reason she really wanted to come forward is because of the message that's on our hat. So, so that's how I spent my time.
Okay, see, it's pilot's life. Just saying. Okay, yeah, fly boys. Okay. So how did your experience in the military translate to later life?
For me, it was my growing up period. I goofed around in college. I was pre-med at Duke University, and they asked me to leave after pulling a prank. And when I went into flight school, I went from goofing around to being real serious. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. So it has always been something that I've been able to point myself, whether I've been good at something or not, over the years, that it's something that I felt I did well.
Yeah, it's kind of a pivot point for you.
My dad, like yours, was career military, 82nd Airborne gliders.
Whoa.
And like you, I appreciate the importance of recording things. I've been writing lots of stories down, mostly humorous, but such as the nurses and things like that, and sending them out to these guys. Stories about my father, so his legacy lives on, things like that.
Tell me about your father.
My father was going to become a priest. He was in Boston. He was in Boston College because his parents wanted him to. He was kicked out of. This is all in the book. He was kicked out of Boston College for impersonating a priest as a practical joke. He was an outstanding athlete in both football and hockey. So he told his parents, couldn't tell them what happened, but he wanted to enlist in the service. And this was in the 30s. I think there's a war coming. So he enlists, and he plays in the local Army teams as a quarterback in football. West Point sees him. And somehow they pull strings to get my father into West Point. He enters the oldest guy in his class, about to turn 22, and is injured in the first game against Rutgers. So West Point is stuck with him for 4 years. My father graduates, the GOAT of his class, last academically. Only he and one other person have done that, became first generals in their class, and that's Custer. So that's my dad, my best friend.
What was his name?
John D. Crowley.
Oh, General.
And he was also the J4 head of logistics in Vietnam under Westmoreland.
So you have kids?
I have a daughter.
Okay. Any grandkids?
2 grandchildren.
Okay. Do your grandkids know your story?
They do, because I'm writing all this down and sending it to them. I'll send them a story a day, or a story a week.
As one grandfather to another, why? Why is this so important?
Because I come from a family that values history and what things like the Holocaust means, what World War I means. I live in Kansas where the World War I Museum is. And I believe, you said something earlier, that we gradually disappear unless there's something documented in writing. So I made sure my father's accomplishments, which are some very funny stuff, are written down, and lots of the things that we've done I've been sending out in humorous form to document those as well. So I'm not into big war stories per se about getting fired at from all different angles. I'm into the more human side.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember where you come from, and sometimes it's interesting. You see these pictures of old people, okay, and I worry that sometimes people forget, especially like our grandkids. It's like, we used to be your age. It's like, hey, Grandpa was going to college and he did a practical joke and they didn't like it and blah, blah, blah. He's like, and that was you.
And these stories are instilled in them.
Yeah.
I make sure of it.
Exactly. Well, well done. Okay, now, I have no idea if there's a joke on this or not, but what in the world does no bone spurs mean?
No bone spurs is a political statement, and I will not, without reticence, say the former president of the United States had 5 military deferments, one of which was were bone spurs in his leg, which he's not sure which leg they were. The doctor who wrote that letter had a storefront office in his father's building. There's no documentation of that whatsoever, and he had 5 military deferments. This person is supposedly the commander-in-chief, and if you talk to anyone in the military who's really paid their dues, they realize what an abomination it is. So that's why I wear no bone spurs.
Okay, what's this with the Thunderbolt?
Oh, that's the 25th Division. That was the primary American division that we supported in Vietnam. We flew for anyone, but that was the primary division.
I've brought this up to all the rest of you, your brothers, and so it's interesting because a lot of the time, history's, like you, I love history, but sometimes I don't think that we even realize ourselves that we're in the middle of history when it's really happening. And so there's something on there with numbers. And this is where I wonder if our children and our grandchildren realize this. So you guys did, the DustOff group, over 1,000 missions.
Each one of us.
Each one of you. And saved a lot of people, literally thousands of people.
Correct.
The thing that I look at is, and you tell me, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of those people probably had kids that have then had kids.
You're exactly right.
And so now all of a sudden, the broad impact that you had and I understand what you say when it's, you don't want to call it kids, because the reality is you grow up real fast in the military.
I was brought up saying children. So.
Yeah, but you're a pilot, so yeah. Anyway, do you think you had a sense? Now, you might have because of the military family, but did you have a sense of purpose of what you were doing and the contribution it was making?
Absolutely. their grandchildren alive today, and people who are able to enjoy their lives because of the efforts of men who flew dust off.
I wonder if those kids and grandkids know that.
You'd be surprised. Now, I've only recently started wearing this vest. Randy gave this to me on my birthday a year and a half ago. And I can't tell you the number of times, because it just jumps out, that people will come up and talk about their fathers or their brothers or their sisters, and appreciate what they appreciate what was done. But yeah, there's no question that many people, maybe not as many as should, but many people do hand down the legacy of what their parents did and their grandparents to their grandchildren.
Now, the name of my show is Jessop's Journal. This is my autograph book. Journal's at home, but this is autograph book, and I am very honored to have you and your other brothers here sign this. But this is made out of leather. To me, leather has a patina. It kind of gets better with age, if you will. And to me, life comes with scars, and there's marks on this. So how do you want to leave your mark?
That at least one period in my life, I did something that was noble.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Are there any questions that I haven't asked you that you would like me to?
You haven't, but it's something that I think always needs to be pointed out for the Vietnam veteran. There's an incident, which I'm sure you're aware of, it's called My Lai. And when My Lai happened, it was in '68. I heard about it in '69. And it was just dumbfounded that something on an organized level could have happened. There are always going to be incidences of atrocities, sadly, off to handle individual type things. But this was a whole unit, a whole company of people who annihilated a village. And I knew when I heard about it, because we were dedicated, and this doesn't come out enough, no one on our aircraft was ever going to be tortured or touched or hurt, whether they're enemy or whatever. We made every effort to honor the sanctity of their lives and to make it as comfortable as possible and to not do what happened in My Lai. But I knew when My Lai came out that we were going to be branded as baby killers. And we were for 30, 40 years. Finally, that's died away. So that's a legacy that I'm bitter about.
Well, the one thing I do like about the dust-off thing here, anyone, anywhere.
You got it.
Anytime. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With another entry into Family Heritage Stories, I'm Doug Jessop.
Why is that? What if you run the damn string?